We're going to start anyway.
Okay.
All right. Grapefruit shandy. Leinenkugels, I guess. See, this is my life. I'm looking at it. I can't read it. My reading glasses are right here. But perfect for a rainy Thursday morning. How are you guys doing?
Great. I'm doing good.
So I dragged my buddies, John Cappadonna and Mike Montalvo, in here to talk about art. I think I'm going to call this episode One Art, Please, from Futurama.
Yeah.
So, the reason I got you guys in here, about the same time, around October, both of you were posting a lot of art, and that's something I can't do. Normally this is all about me and the stuff that I'm into, but I don't do it. My wife does, and you guys are doing some fantastic stuff. Johnny, you do a lot of representational. You've done some abstract, into pottery, and everything else. I think you collect more hobbies than me. And Mike, your style, yours is kind of a brighter, more cartoon type thing, which I really dig and wish I could do.
There was a movie, and I can't remember it now that I'm trying to talk about it, but it was American Pop or something like that. It is an old animated.
It is definitely American Pop.
Is that it?
Yeah, because I had seen it in the 80s when it was on like HBO.
Well, that's how a few people have kind of compared and described the kind of stuff that I've done. It's kind of real American Pop-ish.
Yeah. In fact, I'm going to put up a piece right here that's hanging in the Vann Cave, but you can't see it. Mike did, of a group of us from the fencing club.
Yeah.
We had just finished up, and we posed. Yeah, we posed with all of our medals and everything. And it's done in a...
I think it's more all of your medals, and then...
Yeah, well, I was also the most... I was the coach. I was the most experienced fencer there. But Cliff pointed this out, some detail I had forgotten. Mike posted that on Facebook, and it actually tripped the facial recognition on like 3 of the people in it.
Cool.
Yeah.
So it was like, I think it was me, Sarah, and I think you. I think it tripped them all.
It was me. Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. Of course, Facebook looks at your list. It's not picking from a list of everybody in the world, but that was cool. And anyway, the reason I got to this, another thing I want to bring it up real quick is as you guys know, I'm big on Reddit. And there's a subreddit, a message forum, a theme forum called Delusional Artists. And it's people that are trying to sell just crap. I mean, we're talking worse than the banana taped to the wall. And the reason you two guys are in here is because I know both of you. For those of you who don't know, Johnny's my neighbor. I literally met one of the most interesting people in the world while I was taking out the trash. And of course, Mike, I've known each other for a number of years, mainly through fencing. Mm-hmm. But you guys both of you have a very, you're both good, and you both have a humble approach, a very realistic approach to your art and how you do it. And you both kind of suffer over it, which I know is an artist thing. So what I want to start off with is what started you into it? I'll start with you, Johnny. Like, how did you just decide this is my thing and I'm good at it and I'm going to do it?
That's not how it started at all, because both my sisters are really the artists in the family. Yeah. They're both very good. Both have degrees in art, and my oldest sister, Jean, has received many prestigious awards for her work, and my sister Phyllis is equally as good, but she's just not she doesn't put her stuff out there as much. I mean, she does it for her own satisfaction, and Jean does too. I mean, Jean's an artist, but she had a degree in drawing from Texas Tech, and she had a master's degree in ceramic design from Ole Miss. And I'm trying to replace some of one of the awards that she won. I can't remember the name of it, but I can remember 2 of the other recipients. And one of them was William Faulkner, and the other one was John Grisham.
Okay, yeah.
And so, she's like in numerous textbooks.
Wow.
Her work, and so I grew up in a family that had artists, and I was the black sheep. I mean,
Okay.
I never thought I had any kind of artistic talent whatsoever until I was probably 20 years ago, exactly. And just on a lark, one day I decided, well, I'm going to paint some birds. I'm going to try that. I mean, you know, I can do a lot of things. I'm good with my hands. Maybe I can do this after all, even though I can't draw a stick figure. I mean, seriously, and I'm not exaggerating.
That's encouraging, because that's kind of where I am.
And so I tried, and I did some, and looking back, they're really crude, but they were good enough that I went, well, maybe I can do this. And so I started talking to my sisters, and they said, well, look, you kind of getting the cart before the horse. You need to learn to draw. and so they said, why don't you go out to Midland College and sign up for a drawing class? Just sign up for drawing one. And I was like terrified, you know, that I'd never taken a fine art course in my life. I'd taken art history in college as an elective because I was an anthropology student. And I mean, the thought of that was just pretty terrifying. So I went out and I thought, okay, I'd bought a bunch of books, and you can teach yourself a lot of things and by reading, and certainly art is one of them, but it's a lot easier if you have help.
So you were kind of steeped in it when you started. So did that give you an eye or the desire? I mean, being around it all the time.
Yeah, well, I kind of felt like I was the black sheep. I mean, you know, one that, why can't I do this? I mean, you know, or maybe I was just arrogant enough to think, well, I can do this.
I don't,
you know,
I don't want to be out of line asking this at all, but are you a middle child, or?
No, I'm the baby.
You're the baby? Okay.
Yeah, I'm the tail end. My oldest sister, matter of fact, my oldest sister Jean has passed away a few years ago, and my sister Phyllis is a few years older than me. And, you know, maybe I just never had the right motivation. Anyway, so I went out there and I signed up for class, and my instructor, a gal named Susan Randall, almost the same age I was.
Yeah.
And I had to ask her to audit the class because I was so terrified, and she said okay. So I took the class, and I made so much progress that I was just really amazed myself. So I signed up for drawing 2, and I took drawing 2, and then I took it again and again and again, and I've probably got 120 hours of art.
Okay,
You
I
know.
can see that. Yeah.
But there's a lot of that's one of the nice things about a community college is that there are a lot of casual students, but those casual students are really, especially artists, are really good artists.
Yeah.
So you get in a class, and there's a half a dozen people in there that have more experience than the instructor. I mean, you know, and I've had great instructors. I loved Susan. She was perfect for me. She really knew how to, you know, because you're faced with having to critique your work. Mm-hmm. You're at some point somebody has to say,
and way better people, and
somebody has to say, okay, this is what's wrong and this is what's good. But one of the things that I liked about Susan so much is that she never said anything critical without saying something good.
Yeah.
And so while she critiqued, she didn't just destroy your ego. I mean, completely to where you're just going to go, well, this isn't for me. I'm out of here. She made you want to come back and try harder the next time. And I don't think I've ever done a drawing or a painting that I didn't think I could do better the next time. Have you, Mike?
No. Every time I finish something, it's like, well, there's that. I could have done that better. I could have done this a little bit better. Next time that I go in and do this, I can, you know, I know where that little mistake is or how to change that one little detail so I can make it better. but it's never anything that's going to be 100% at any time. It's always you can do better the next time.
That's right. And it comes to a point where then you become your own worst critic.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
other people, and I think as you're an artist, you kind of back off on that criticism a little bit because you know kind of the road they're gone down or going down. So, but drawing is a skill you can learn. It's not to say that some people aren't more talented than others. I mean, because I've had people say, "Oh, you're so blessed. You have such a great talent." And I'm going, "Wait a minute. I worked hard to get here.
Yeah.
It took me 10 years, or it took me 5 years."
People have said that about music, and we've said it before. I wasn't born with this talent. I do not have a musical ear. I was almost tone deaf. The thing is, I spent most of my adolescence sitting on the edge of a bed with a music book, pounding away on a guitar and sounding like crap. And that's the reality of it. You know, we just do that.
Well, like I told you guys one time, it's whenever Tim Kreitz band is on stage, I always look at you guys and think it's just so effortless for you. But then, like Tim will say, it's not that it's just effortless. It's just all that time practicing, and it's all that work that went into it that made it to where it's that tight. And
Tim is his band is as far as rehearsing the work and learning it and being detailed. I mean, Tim's not a slave driver, but he's a perfectionist, and that comes with the musician and artist ego. And Tim tells us when we get bored and he sees Britt and I getting ready to jump him in the parking lot, he says, "Look, good musicians practice until they get it right. Great musicians practice until they can't get it wrong." And then I go, okay. And those are the nights when you're up there, and it happened on stage with us one time, and I don't want to get into music too much, but it goes along with what you're saying. We were playing in front of a big crowd, a couple thousand people, at a festival gig, and the bass amp blew up. It wasn't mine. It was a rental backline, and I had my own rig, and they kept checking my cables and my rig, and I said, "Guys, it's not on my end. There's something wrong with your amp." And they went through it. And I sat there having conversations with stage crews, not being able to hear any notes coming out of my guitar. And I saw the video later, and I played the song through the whole thing. Like through all the conversations, no monitor, no feedback. I played it, and that was because we had done it so much. It was there, and as soon as it came on, I was right there on the money. It was there. So, and what Johnny said, and the reason you guys are here is it takes a certain amount of ego to put your work out there, and so that you walk the line between, reclusive drawing in your basement and nobody sees it until you die, and they go through this and they go, "Wow, this guy was a great artist," all the way to the people on Reddit under delusional artists that, stick a blown tissue on a canvas and says, "Behold my art. I want 10,000 for it."
Wait, when did you see that? I posted it just a couple minutes ago. So
I'll send both you guys a link if you haven't seen it. It's amazing, and if you're a new artist, it will make you feel so good about yourself when you see what some of the people are doing. It's amazing. But what got you into it, Mike? Where did you start?
Whenever I was a kid, I started drawing, just like kids will do, and it's and I hate kind of saying it like this, but I think it's the one thing that my family kind of praised me for. It was like, "Oh, you're doing really good at this, or you're doing this. You did a good job on that picture." And so the reason I asked if you were a middle child is because I'm a middle child, and both of my brother and my sister both went into music. So my brother's out composing and teaching in Louisiana. My sister's teaching in Odessa, and with both of them, my family had a real big push, for them and doing all of that. So for me, going in and seeing, okay, I'm getting recognition and I'm getting support for doing, just these drawings. If I keep doing that, then I'll get that recognition and I'll get that support from my family. And so I think that's kind of what kept me going and kept me pushing. And then it got to a point where it's like, I'm not really so concerned with that. I just love doing it because it's a lot of fun, and just being able to to be able to do this is what's really pushing me. And so I didn't ever really take any art classes through a school, through middle school or through high school until my senior year. And whenever I went into that class and started taking it, my teacher was like, "Why didn't you take this class sooner? Because you really should have." And I was like, I don't know. I was doing band. I was doing everything else, just trying to keep with that music to be a part of that whole family thing that I had going on at the time. And I was like, I should have taken this sooner. I don't know why I didn't. And then whenever I went to college, I went to Midland College, and I took the class with Susan, and it was that same thing. She was really supportive. She was always there just encouraging me. And so I went in and took the drawing 1, then went to drawing 2, and then I was like, well, I want to do more with this. So went in and did life drawing, and I did a little bit of painting with Warren. I can't remember his last name, but
Taylor.
Yeah, for whatever reason, we just didn't click at all, and he went the entire semester calling me different names each class, and he was like, well, he was singling me out for any little thing that I would do, and someone else would do something, and it's like, oh no, it's fine, it's okay. But I would, mess up one thing, and it's like, well, you did this, and you're not doing good enough for this, and you're not doing good enough for that. And it finally got to a point where we kind of really started butting heads, and then in the final, I was just like, you are a terrible teacher to me. You just can't. I don't know why you're doing this. And he told me to leave his office, and I've never spoken or seen to him since then. It was just...
Wow.
I don't know what it was about me. For whatever reason, it just wouldn't go away no matter what happened. And then I started drawing comics for the college paper. And this was back whenever South Park did that whole thing where they showed Muhammad on...
Oh, yeah.
And so I did a comic about that, and just kind of... I don't even remember what it was saying, but it was just that joke about how you can make jokes about Hitler, you can make jokes about God or Jesus or whatever, but the one thing that you make jokes about, I don't want to get into, but if you make a joke about Muhammad or show that, then all of a sudden that's taboo, while everything else isn't. And I did that comic, and they ran it in the paper, and then I was getting people coming up to me and saying, "Oh, that was really good. I really liked that." And that's whenever it was like, okay, this is actually something that's really going somewhere, that's happening. And then after school, there would be periods where it was just kind of, I would stop doing anything, and then these last couple of years I've kind of jumped back into everything. So it's
tell me about Inktober. That's kind of when I was thinking about this episode.
Yeah, so every October they send out a prompt list that is one drawing for every day in October. And what you do is you can draw everything out in pencil, however you want to design it, but the final drawing has to be done in ink. And like I said, you have to be done. It has to be one every day. And so with Inktober, I'd never done it before, but I was like, I need a way to really jump back into everything and really get wet my feet, I guess.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to do this. And whenever I found the prompt, it was like, it was right before October. And I was like, this is kind of the perfect starting point for me, or the restarting point for me. And so I just started with one and just kept going on through all of Inktober. So this last one, I came close to missing a few days, but I was always able to get it in just before that deadline to it.
As these guys are talking, I'm gonna edit in art, and don't worry about moving your mic, Johnny. I can take out all the noise that's not on the guy that's talking. So whatever you got to do, just yank it around. It won't hurt you. It won't. I'll cut all that out later. You guys remind me, and I didn't take art. I wish I did. In junior high, 7th grade in 80, whenever I went to 83. I wanted to take band because I wanted to be a musician. My stepfather had done band, and he was like, "You don't want to do that. It's horrible." And he said, "You should take art." And I thought, well, I've had art an art class since 1st grade. I'm done with that. So I took shop because my stepfather was a cabinet maker. My uncle had been a carpenter. I was around it, and I wanted to make things, and I was really interested in that. And then I figured out shop is where they stick the washouts. So you don't get to do cool stuff because 70% of the class are morons that are just waiting until they're old enough to drop out. And that's what happened. I mean, there were dudes literally playing with themselves in the back of the class. But I learned mechanical drawing, and there's only so far you can go when you got 4 or 5 guys in the class that really care, that open that textbook, and they're excited about learning wood turning and things like that. But anyway, I didn't take it until I had to in high school for a credit we had to have. So like last semester, senior year, I took one. And there were a lot of other people in that boat that just didn't think they had the inclination and didn't care. And Hugh Cooper was the instructor. And I think he was at the Pallet Club here in Midland for a long time, out there by COM. And that guy, his class, first of all, he was stern and about being on time and all that. And he was just, I don't know how to explain it. He wasn't just, jovial and warm. He was pretty old school, but he really inspired us. And I thought of this, I was reminded of this last night, and you talking about pen and ink. Mm-hmm. We had to do a pen and ink where it was penciled, like with a 4H, and you went over it with an old school fountain pen or whatever they gave us. I can't remember. And I did an abstract. And I have it somewhere, and I cannot find it because I really want this to be true. But I did this abstract, and my heart wasn't in anything I did in there, really. And so I did this just based on some curves that I like to draw, the kind of stuff you doodle when you're on the phone, mm-hmm. And so I drew this thing, and it was big. I don't remember, what size, 16 by 20 or so. And about a month later, I'm sitting at my desk in art drawing, doing whatever the hell they told us to do. And he came by and he shoves this my drawing in front of him, and he says, "You need to name this." And I was like, I barely remember doing that, in high school. And he said, "I'm putting it in a contest, but you need to name it and you need to sign it in the corner." So I scribbled it, and I had no idea. I forgot about this thing. Mm-hmm. And I swear, I think I called it Infinity and Beyond, right? The mm-hmm. Buzz Lightyear thing. I swear I did. The word infinity was in it. I want to find that so bad. I know it's in a trunk somewhere. But I wanted to tell you guys some of the things he did. He sat us down and gave us all a big sheet of paper, and we folded it into a book, like with 8 panels. And he said, I'm going to give you a topic, and you sketch the first thing you think of. One was a machine that could fly, float, submerge underwater, and underground. And the sweetest thing in the world, and what you would hate to meet in a dark alley. And he came up with 8 things like this. And this was first thing in the morning, so all of us kids are just brain dead. It's like 7 in the morning. And again, most of the people in there, not the artsy kind. And when it was all over, he said, "Unfold your paper, pick one, and you're going to make a paper mache sculpture of it." I thought, okay, that's weird. Well, of course, I picked the machine, mm-hmm. and one of them was how you picture yourself at 60 or 70 or 80 or something like that, elderly. And again, we're talking not washouts, but students who art isn't their thing, and they had a show at the end of it from like 2 or 3 classes that were run simultaneously. I was blown away by what people did. One of them did Gossamer, the son of Medusa, was this big like zombie slimy creature crawling out of the muck, and it was beautiful. And this is paper mache. And one girl did the sweetest thing in the world, and it was a sickeningly sweet, cartoonish girl with a big lollipop and the big braids. And this one guy who was the token 80s party guy, drugs and alcohol and all that stuff. In fact, he later died in a DWI accident, I believe. He did a bust of an old man, bald, in a Chippendales outfit, the collar and the black pants, and he's thumbs up, and that was him when he's 80. And I was just amazed at how much art that Mr. Cooper sucked out of people that really came to be. So that was what I did. I look back at some of the stuff that I still have, and I'm going, hey, it's not bad, but I just don't have, I don't know, maybe it's just I don't want to put the time into it because other things come easier to me. So, but.
Well, it does take some dedication, and that's one of the things that I have noticed about some my art friends that are really good artists they're very dedicated to it, more dedicated than me. Some people sketch all the time and practice, and you can. Drawing's a skill you can learn from the get-go.
Everybody's head
Yeah.
at the table's nodding. You know.
I mean,
Yeah.
And now, how far you go and how good you get depends on dedication and some talent. You know, I mean, because just like you said, I mean, I certainly was not a prodigy by any stretch of the imagination, because I was in my 50s when I started. I mean, you know, I'm 67 now, and I started in 2000, so, you know, it's and it took me about 5 years. I mean, and the ultimate goal was so I could paint. The first first I had to start learning to draw, and then I learned that you don't draw the same way to paint that you do if your drawing is your ultimate
I never
goal.
thought about that.
Yeah.
Like you've seen some of my paintings, and they vary. I mean, some of them are kind of crude, and they're not. They're controlled and they're representational. They're not abstract, but some of them are more meticulous and detailed than others.
Right.
Will you do thumbnails or like the smaller, you know, drawings or paintings just to kind of say this is how I want it to look, and then go on to the bigger one, or
No,
do you just?
I don't. I cheat.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time when I'm doing something like that, most of the stuff the things that I've won awards for are the real detailed, are birds.
Mm-hmm.
And they're from photographs that I've taken myself, and they're really portraits. And what I do, I cheat. I take Photoshop, and I use Photoshop to compose
Yeah.
in lieu of thumbnail sketches.
Mm-hmm.
And so it saves time.
Yep.
And when you consider, and then when I settle on what I'm going to draw, then the paintings, I mean, the drawing that I do for a bird is what I would call a contour drawing, and it defines the edges of
Oh, okay. So the shapes and
landmarks.
okay. Yeah.
And when you're drawing a bird or an animal or a person, there's certain things you got to get right. Eyes, nose, mouth on a person. I mean, and but in a bird, there's a little leeway with feathers, but you have to. They don't have to be perfect, because each bird there's a little variation, but you have to get the eye in the right place. You have to get the bill exactly the right shape, because one bird to the next, and the subtle differences are really, especially when you're dealing with people that are birders or experts or biologists, and surprisingly, most of the people that buy my stuff are either other artists, or they're biologists, or birders, or people that know birds. I mean, and you have one of the ones that I did that they had a contest for the Texas Ornithological Society, and that one of them was a tie with the topic they wanted to do their T-shirt or something. I don't know what it was. So they ended up selling that same painting to a biologist, and so they got to be right, and they need to be right to the point where an expert can look at that and go, oh, this is not what's wrong. That's not the same as painting a bird on your cardinal on your mug, on your coffee mug. Different deal altogether, and it's a different audience.
Yeah.
So, in going for exactness, that contour drawing works like a roadmap, and it's, or maybe a simpler way to put it is a paint by number, a really complex paint by number with no numbers. I mean,
That makes sense.
That's a good way to, yeah.
Yeah.
you paint by numbers are oversimplified, and you color in this, but it's a matter of dealing with the shapes, and and that's another thing, learning to see things differently. You see shapes rather than an whole image, because your brain will trick you, and instead of drawing what you see, you draw what you think you see, and it's not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's
I
beautiful.
mean, sometimes there's books that will have told you to turn something upside down, like if you're painting or you're drawing from a photo, or you turn it upside down. And
oh, okay. So it kind of blows your preconceived sense of what the curves and stuff are.
You
Wow.
begin looking at shapes rather than the whole image. If you took, drawing, you probably used a grid at some point or not.
Yep.
Okay. Well, a grid, you can draw a grid on your paper, and then you can draw a grid over what you're drawing from.
Right.
And then you can look at one little square. It doesn't have to be the same size. It can be even bigger. You can be working from a photograph that's this big, but drawing a painting that's this big.
Yeah.
But it's the same proportion. But what you do is you end up looking at the shapes in one little grid.
Oh, okay.
And eventually, after you do that enough times, you don't need the grid anymore. I mean, you know what I'm saying? I mean, you begin to process that visual information the same way, but without the crutch of the grid.
So that leads me to a question that I wanted to ask you guys. One of the things I did in my career was handwriting analysis, which is it's kind of witchcraft, but it works. You can make nothing you can testify to in court, but you can look at some handwriting and you can pick up some investigative ideas, some leads. Like if you write a story and you make a certain mistake when you're mentioning a certain word, I can tell maybe when you write John's name that you don't like John, or you really like John, or if John likes, if he writes purple cars in a certain way in a sentence, that he doesn't like purple cars. So you'll give a detective an idea of, I should really pick on this guy about where he was at this time because he leaves a lot of spaces and all. That's what it is. And I was looking at my own handwriting on these notes, and some of them I wrote in a hurry, and some of them look like my drafting block. So it's all a mess. Do you have to approach, when you do a grid or something you have to keep coming back to, how do you not make mistakes from square to square if you're in a different mindset, or do you only do it when you're in that kind of the right frame of mind? Does that make sense? Like if you're having a day, like a busy day, can you sit down and calm down and do that? Or do you just say, you know what, I've got too much on my mind today and the roofers are banging away, or the wind's blowing and it's annoying me, or I didn't sleep last night? Does it change as your mindset changes when you're working on a multi-session piece?
If nothing else, that's what erasers were made for.
Okay,
So,
that makes sense.
But yes, I mean, if you can afford to do that. Now, if you're in a class and you've got a deadline and they say do this, then you have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you're having a bad day, then your drawing just stinks.
Okay.
I mean, but yes,
yeah.
there are times when I've been painting and man, you just get in the zone. Same thing like you're playing, and it seems like you can't do anything wrong. But it's a matter of focus. And strangely enough, I think that's part of the therapeutic value.
Okay,
Because
I totally see that.
Because I used to, I would do it after work. I took night classes, and I would go in after work, and sometimes I'd be tired, or I'd be, but then when I'd go in and start to draw, you you zero all
Tune
that.
out.
It's kind of a Zen thing, you know.
Yeah, it is.
You get focused in on your drawing, and everything else just goes away. And so what you might think was tedious becomes relaxing.
There we go.
You know what I'm saying? I mean,
I know exactly. I don't know if you guys have ever read Sergeant Carlos Hathcock's book, Marine Sniper.
Oh, yeah.
And I did precision rifle. Of course, I was SWAT, and I wasn't military. But something he explained that is with me to this day is he called it the bubble. That when he's in that zone, you have to be so detailed in your thought that there's no room for anything else. And these guys, they had it worse than we did. I mean, the worst I had was, heat and ant beds and stuff like that. But this guy would lay in one spot for days. And I don't think I've laid in one spot more than 6 or 8 hours, 10 hours maybe. But when it comes time to make that shot, you have to be in tune with everything, with the wind. You have to watch the mirage through your scope. You have to be aware of your bullet path. You have all these things are going on. And I developed that through competition more than I did shooting, that you have to be completely in tune with that, and you can't think about anything else. There's no room to think about your sore feet, or that you haven't called your wife in a couple of days because you've been out in the sticks or whatever. There's nothing for it, and which is why I've gotten into archery a lot more. I've done it since I was a kid, but there's so much to it. There's so much to it. Shot, not only your environment, but there's a lot more finesse and positioning and where your joints are and your eyes and all are. That I can't think about all my problems I got now. Mm-hmm. I got to worry about hitting the target and not slinging an arrow into Johnny's yard.
There's no room for that, and that's kind of, you're right. I mean, because I used to shoot too, not in competition, but not in serious stuff. I mean, but even I was pretty good. Yeah. And I wanted to be, and I was competitive.
But
I was, and it's funny because I was competitive in that, but in a real, I think, a good, wholesome, friendly way. But when you compare, I hadn't thought about that, but it's this. It is. I mean, shooting's a mental game.
Oh yeah.
I mean, completely. And I mean, yes, there are some physical. You have to be reasonably.
Yeah, there's that, but there's a feel to it that you get in art, because you see the movies that they have now, with the overblown CGI of the bullet path, and this, even rifle or pistol, when you get tuned enough, you can see that bullet. Mm-hmm. Especially slow stuff, 45s and like that. 223 at 7 yards, you don't see that, but a 308 at 600 yards, you see it cut in the mirage, you see it cutting through that air, and you feel that. And an arrow just across my backyard, I can feel that, and the especially you get some wind and you feel that shot. And I understand that in art, I just can't do it. And I love to tell people my beautiful wife is an artist, but the difference between her and you, the two of you, isn't talent, it's ego, because she hates everything she's ever done. Like I married an artist, and I expected to live in, I don't know, with all this art around me, and I realized it's they suffer months for something that she suffers months to create something that she's going to hate forever. and I tease her about it. Now she's doing a lot of jewelry, and I'll put it up here. Her Christmas spiders. It's an old German folk tale, and she's doing some of that. And she was a sculptor, and she's an art. She's done different media. She was telling me about an art class. She used to sneak in and hide till they closed the school and work on her projects all night. Hide again and show up for class in the morning. But she was telling me she had a professor, and you made me think of this, Johnny, that he said that representational art is not art. And he was one of those. And now here's where I think about this. When I see what you do, it amazes me, because that was the world before we had cameras. Okay, that's how people, if you lived on one side of the world and or one side of the country, and you wanted to show me this bird you saw, and I'm your brother on the other coast, that was the only way to do it. And I think it's valuable to keep that sort of thing alive. It's just like Morse code. There's absolutely no need for it except for ham radio jerks. We're still we're still communicating with Marconi age technology today, and we're keeping it alive, and I think that's valuable. So,
I used to kind of think almost in the reverse of what that guy, if it wasn't representational, then it wasn't worthwhile.
It's cheap and lazy was how I saw it a lot of times.
And it took me a while, and just because you're an artist doesn't necessarily mean you're right about judging art. And when I hear things like that, it affirms my belief that that's true, because what I've come is just the other way around. I mean, the more I've tried to do something doesn't mean that what other people do, because it's different from me, doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. In fact, it's just not what I do. And I don't know, did you happen to see Burr Williams' post last night on Facebook? And it was about art and his photography and my comment.
The Warhol quote.
Yeah, and it was about just keep doing it and don't worry about what people think about it. Mm-hmm. And I'm surprised, because I was kind of surprised that it was an Andy Warhol comment, but it makes sense when you think about it. I mean, because first, and that was what I got into was when I first got into art, it wasn't because of an ego thing. It wasn't, I wanted, because I couldn't draw a stick figure. I mean, how am I going to, I mean, it's not like, okay, look at me, I'm a good artist. It's like, you're looking for some kind of self-expression, some kind of form of self-expression. And and my comment is that I think most artists, in fact, that I know, first and foremost, do their thing for themselves and for their own satisfaction. I mean, and even like in your situation when you said you did it, but you did it because you wanted to fit in. I mean, and you got praise for it. And I mean, you were trying to say something, and you eventually got it. And sometimes people are looking to say things, and they'll say things in art that they would never say in public.
This guy right
Absolutely.
Here, perfect example.
I think I would say that. Yeah. I would say that's probably a trait of most cartoonists.
Well, if I can backtrack just a minute and talk about that zone that whenever you're in, whenever you're doing art, there are times when I have to have some kind of background noise a lot of the time for me, just whenever I'm doing something like that. And so I'll put on an audio book or I'll put on a TV show. And there are books that I've listened to and shows that I've watched that I don't remember anything about, because it's just, you're so caught up in that art project that you're doing that everything else just vanishes whenever you get into that zone for it. And I mean, it's a weird feeling kind of looking back at it like that and realizing how in depth you got into it whenever you're just seeing just those shapes or everything for it.
Yeah, you don't even really realize it until you do it. I mean, then you're starting to do this and you get into it and you're going, man, things are going right, and then it's just like everything else in the room just goes away.
It's you're working and you're just, okay, it's 5 o'clock, I'm off work, I'm going to start working, and then you look up and it's 2:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I really appreciate about Mike's art, and I've spent a lot more time with Mike than I have with John. John and I, it's amazing. We're very much alike, and then that means we're always screwing with our hobbies and not hanging out with each other. That's how we are with Tim Kreis and I were like that for years. But I spend a lot of time with Mike, and he says things, and you kind of get in tune with his humor and the way he thinks. And I see his art, and I'm like, that's 100% Mike. That's it. And you mentioned proportions and phases and how to get things down. Mike can draw a cartoon. I know exactly who that is. And it's features are exaggerated and changed, but I know who they are because you nail that even in an imaginary world.
Thank you.
I want to talk. I want to kind of go around some of the art that I have because I like art pieces of my friends and family. And one of the things that I really like, I've seen some of yours and a touch of yours, but I love a good artist. I love seeing their sketches, their ideas. I did a paper on Da Vinci in an art class that I was held at gunpoint to take. And what was amazing to me about Da Vinci was his, they called it his notebook, not the a cappella band, but the sketches he did before his presentation piece, like his giant crossbow and stuff like that. If you can dig them up, they're fascinating. There's a piece up there, and I'll show a close-up of it here, but it's right there by that mirror. That was my grandmother's, and it is a giant abstract of all kinds of stuff. She kept that by the telephone. Now, for our younger people here, there was a time when if you wanted to talk to your relative that was 50 miles away, you did it after 9 o'clock because the long distance rates were cheaper, and you would talk for a considerable amount of time. And she would draw, and she kept that for years and years and years. And it's one of those pieces of art. And I have a lot of her representational. She was typical of the era. It was a lot of still lifes and landscapes. And she taught me to watercolor. And I have some up here, and I forgot where they are, that I'm proud of, that she taught me when I was 8 or 9 years old. But I love that kind of stuff. And I'm going to show some pictures, some stuff from Dr. Richard Zhu. Dr. Zhu is an optometrist. I want to say that. I offended an ophthalmologist friend when I called him an optometrist. So I introduced him now as a herpetologist or a cosmetologist. I don't know. Richard Culbert that we used to fence with.
Yep.
Yeah. He corrected me one time, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what you are. So every time he would come in and he helped coach, and I'd say, why don't you go work with Dr. Dr. Culbert? He's a herpetologist. I just make stuff up. I believe Dr. Zhu is an optometrist, but he posts a lot of his sketches and then some of his final art. He and I only know each other through Facebook, through a cancer patient group. He's also a cancer survivor, and he's into Burning Man and a lot of stuff like that. Really interesting dude. But I get to see his sketches and stuff that he throws up, and that's really interesting to me. And I have a few of my wife's, not many, but I have like I said, my grandmother's. And I'll put up a piece here. I meant to show it to you guys, and I left my phone in there. It's a moonscape, and I'll tell you why I love this piece. In 1988, I went with my friend Yun Mei and a bunch of other friends, typical 80s group, like right out of a Breakfast Club type movie. And we all went to Lake Spence, I think it was. Her dad had a really cool boat. I wish I would have taken pictures of that boat. It's one of the old kind of cuddy cabin boats with the V6 Chrysler inline. Yeah. And we went out and hung out and did stuff. But we walked out to this dock at night, and I had my 35 millimeter, and I was heavy into photojournalism. And there's a beautiful moon with the reflection on the water. And I had nothing but my camera and a mag light. I was already in the Police Explorers, so I had this giant light. And, it's a hippie stick light. They used to call them, the 6C cell that you could swing like a katana. And so I sat down Indian style and set the camera and tried to do some extended exposures. And they're all a little fuzzy. They didn't come out quite right, but I got the color and I got the moon. And I hated them because they're out of focus, right? Because that's just, the photographer thing in me. My wife grabbed one of those out of my album and drew me a charcoal of it, of that scape, and left the blur in it, and it's beautiful. And she did that for me, and not just because it's for me, but it's a gorgeous piece. So that's a very meaningful thing, and of course she hates it because blah, blah, blah. I have no idea. But it's very meaningful to me that she did that. It was a really pretty piece. So, but that's all I got to say about that. So are you where you want to be, Johnny, or is there something else you want to get into as far as your art?
Well, I'm working on ceramics now.
Your steampunk, I'm going to put it up here. I swore I was not going to go outside of drawing, but your steampunk teapot, I'd absolutely adore it.
Well, there was, among my other hundreds of hobbies that I'd like to cook. So I try to, I don't know if it's subconsciously or what, but I tie things together. You know, I love to do things with my hands. I like to build things. You know,
Yeah.
very much like what you said. I love to do woodwork. I like to weld. I like to make stuff. I like to, you know, things that most people wouldn't attempt. I mean,
Right.
I like to do. And so I thought, well, you know, what if I really like to do some pottery, but I'd like to make some functional pieces and maybe try to incorporate some of my drawing, painting skill into that. Well, I haven't done the first functional piece yet. Well, I take that back. I think I have made some coffee mugs, but you know, but because when you go into class now, I've got to do
Right.
the things
Right.
that it's expected of me to do, at least for the first couple of times I take the class. But I'll push the limit. I mean, you know, in other words, if he gives me an assignment, you know, I will push that assignment, that limit of the assignment to, and I did that with Susan. I used to do that a lot. Mm-hmm. And then it got to where she got tickled with it. I mean, she enjoyed it because she would like, okay, let's see what John's going to come up with. You know, what kind of off the wall weird thing is he going to twist my assignment into? And then she had fun with it. But that's kind of part of the art thing. But so I went with the intent of maybe incorporating some painting and drawing, and I did a coffee mug that I painted a bird on an underglaze, and it's waiting to be fired. I haven't bisque fired it yet, but I did this. The first teapot that I did, I watched. It's another problem with me. I get immersed in something, and I mean, I am like zeroed in on it. And
That's me. Yeah.
And so I'm watching all these videos, I'm reading all these books, and I'm learning about glazes. And the thing about ceramics, it can be as complicated as you want to go. It can be freaking chemistry, or it can just be mud. I mean, literally. And it's tactile, so it's enjoyable for people who like to construct things.
Yeah.
And a lot of the skills, like woodworking skills, you can apply to ceramics.
Yep.
Painting skills. I mean, any of those things you can a lot of those things you can apply. And so I watched this video. I ran across this video on YouTube of this Chinese lady, and I can't pronounce the names of the cities and whatnot in Chinese, but this lady must have been 80 years old, and it was like they called her a national treasure. So, and she was making these teapots that have been made since the Ming Dynasty in this area.
Mm-hmm.
And they're made of a special purple clay. They're unglazed, and they're hand built. And they're amazing. And I watched this lady do them on a video used a kind of a turntable thing. They're called banding wheels, but they just turn, and you set the stuff on it, and it's just so you can rotate the piece so that you can work on it easily.
Oh yeah.
It's not like a potter's wheel.
Right.
And but so she makes these slabs, and she uses a wooden mallet, and she beats the clay out.
Yep.
Instead of using a machine to roll it out and make a slab, she beats it out, and she beats it out perfectly. I mean, and then she cuts it, and she forms it around this perfectly round slab of clay, which she cuts with a beam compass, and puts it on this, and then wraps the the clay slab around it, and then she fixes the seam, and then she takes a wooden paddle.
Are these the tools that you made?
Yes.
He posted he made the tools to do this.
And so, and that was part of the fun. I was like, man, I think I could do that. And I did. And believe me, it took me 6 hours, but to do this teapot. But when I got done, it looked like
it does, yeah.
There, I mean, it looked like $1 million. I was astounded. I mean,
so there's not really an end to where you want to go with this.
The problem is that with me, one thing leads to another. There's no end to the road. There's just a series of Y's in the road, but eventually they get back. Sometimes they get back to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, just like the ceramics in the cooking. Eventually, I'll make something. I'll make something that I can use.
When my wife and I go to Houston, we go for my doctor visits, and we're usually there for several days. And we go to X10 Archery in Houston, which is a really nice range, and it's geared toward Olympic style target archery. But there's some guys there that made English longbows. Right, it's these dudes, with ponytails and leather armbands that are stitched together with the big, Frankenstein stitches, and they have these X-shaped stands that you lay your bow on when you're not shooting. And this guy he'd made an English longbow with this beautifully leather-wrapped handle. And of course, the cross section is everything on those. So this guy had shaved it down, probably with an adze or something like spoke shave, or he was, everything he did was traditional, so I don't see a router ever touching that.
Right.
And I looked at that, and he let me hold it, and it smelled wonderful. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm not going to do that. No, put it down and get away, because I don't need to do this. But it was an artistry and a functional artistry. The dude made his own strings and all that. It was just beautiful. It was a work of art. And he launched these he made his own arrows, real feathers, hand straighten them. He had the straightening tool, the little ring that they would bend, and kind of heat it up and all this stuff, and just it was phenomenal. Made his own points. It was crazy.
So I told you before, I'm the guy that doesn't want to just know what time it is. I want to know how to make the watch. Well, I'm back to the ceramic tools in that.
Yeah.
The little lady making those. So I made a mallet, and I made some wooden spatulas, and I made the things. One of the things she uses is just a tapered stick, and it's amazing how handy a tapered stick can be.
Yep. When
you watch how she used it, and then you went, wow, and I did the same thing. I was like, man, this is the way to go, and so she's got this little knife. A metal knife with a narrow handle and a kind of a leaf-shaped blade. Well, some time ago, I built a furnace, a forge, not a furnace, a forge. And it's a little mini forge about this big, and it'll get hot enough it will forge steel. So I go and I buy several different types of steel, and you can layer this steel, and you forge weld it.
It's like the Japanese folding.
It's exactly what it is, and it's we called it Damascus steel.
Yeah, and it comes out I was going to say the Damascus kind of water shape pattern.
It just, what happens is each time you fold it, it's like making croissants.
Yep.
You start out with 7 layers of steel. Well, the first time you fold it, now there's 14. Next time you fold it, there's 28. The next time you fold it, there's 56, and the next time you fold it, there's 112 layers. So it doesn't take many folds, and you fold it and you hammer it. You put it back in the forge until it gets to temperature, and you keep layering it and hammering it. And I had to get an anvil, and I had to get then I learned to TIG weld and made a stand for my anvil that I could carry around. With just 75-pound anvil instead of a 400-pound anvil, so I could at least move it around my garage, and some various different kind of hammers and whatnot. So now I have this billet that I've started of this Damascus steel, and I'm thinking, I've got a purpose. I can I'm going to finish folding that steel and forge me one of those little knives like she has.
That's amazing.
And that's how things get around.
I feel you. I'm the exact same way. And a vision popped in my head when you said tapered stick. My late Uncle Bill, not only is he a craftsman, but we'll call him a budget craftsman. Right? He was, Anyway, he bought an RV with an air conditioner on it. It was like a pop-up camper. I say RV, it was more of a trailer. But it looked like somebody had drug it through a hailstorm, and the dissipation fins, the fins on the air conditioner, the aluminum fins were all beat to hell. And he sharpened a piece of dowel rod that was probably, I don't know, ash or maple, whatever, usually poplar probably. And he sharpened it in a pencil sharpener. And then he sanded it flat to the right deal so he could straighten out those fins. And I had a hailstorm hit and banged up one of my cars. And he gave me that stick. And he just, I keep it. I got 2 or 3 of them, and I straightened it out. And I put it in the shop, and I cannot tell you how many things I have used that for. I've used it for sanding. I've used it for shaping. I've used all kinds of stuff, all kinds of crazy things. Just that one simple, like you said, from a pointy stick, the stuff that you get. So
I was watching her, and I guess that's one of the things that I was so enamored with her skill and such simple tools.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she made this beautiful teapot. When she got done, she paddled it, and just by doing that, it burnished. It compressed the clay when she beat it out, which makes it denser, and it makes it better to work. And that's clay requires. You wouldn't think so, but it requires feel, and not all clay is the same. And it's like the clay they make in class. When you first make it, it's not that good to work with, but the longer it sits there, the better it gets. And the more you wedge it, when you wedge clay, you kind of knead it, but what you're doing is working the air out and compressing it. But it also distributes the moisture evenly in the clay, so it makes the clay more workable and feels better. And different clays feel differently, and now a lot of that has to do with touch.
Yeah.
And well, you said you were trying to do watercolor. Okay. Watercolor, he mentioned that he was kind of getting into watercolor's by far the most difficult.
And that is a strange bird.
And what's funny is, as a kid, everybody does watercolor, right? Well, watercolor is really difficult because it goes everywhere. It just, it has, but you can eventually, if you learn the paper, you'll get a favorite paper. Like it might be Arch's cold press, which is probably the most common paper, but it's a good paper, and you get to learn how the paint reacts on the paper. And damp paper works differently than dry paper, and there's almost an infinite number of ways you can mix up the paint.
Did you know? I'm gonna butcher the name because it's been 40 years since I've heard it. There was a watercolor instructor in Odessa. I think his name was Birdsong. I may be screwing this up. Do you remember that? This would have been in the 70s.
Long before I was probably interested in it.
Okay. My grandmother, my grandfather died the year I was born in 1970, and she got into art, I think, just to kind of clear her head. So by the time I was 5 or 6, 7, I remember her painting constantly, and she was taking lessons from him.
At that point, I was more concerned about going off to Vietnam.
Okay, that would be a priority issue. She, I remembered watching her art kind of change, and when she was teaching me later, some of the things she did were typical watercolor, the pastel-y, flowy, you could tell it looked wet. Some of it looked like oil. And then she would score the paper with razors to get different effects. She would actually texture the paper before she put it on there. And, I mean, she could do rocks. She could do there was some kind of a plant. I forgot what it is. I'll have to ask Burr Williams. He'll know. But kind of a tall, sort of like Johnson grass. And she could draw a field of those, and she would score with a razor. She had sandpaper, and she would scratch stuff with the tip of like a steak knife, like a not seriously sharp knife. And
Anything.
and she would texture it up, and it would look like any kind of medium. She did stuff that looked like charcoal. She did stuff, like I said, some that looked like oil, and it was just fantastic.
I have a story kind of similar that goes along with that. It's not mine, but Bill Watterson, who did the Calvin and Hobbes comic strip. He I heard a story one time where he was trying to get the look on one of the strips just right, and he couldn't find anything that was doing it. So he went outside and got a stick and dipped it into his ink in order to do one of the trees or something like that, and that's what he was able to use, and that's what gave him that look that he was wanting for it. But
so is watercolor your next thing?
I think watercolor is kind of where I'm headed right now. I've also been watching a lot of sculpting videos on YouTube, so I'm thinking I might try to venture towards that at some point here in the next year. So
fantastic, man. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
The watercolor, I mean, when I painting those bird paintings, they're not watercolor, they're acrylic, but they're done using watercolor technique. And so I've done a few watercolors. I don't know if you go back in my art file on my Facebook, there's one of Venice, of some people in a gondola. And it's, a typical.
I'll put that up.
Well, that is a true, honest to goodness watercolor. In watercolor, there are no whites. The paper is the white. There's no such thing as white watercolor. And now that's as a purist, okay? I mean, obviously there's another type of paint called gouache that's like watercolor with marble dust in it, and it's opaque, and you can use that to put in white if you make a mistake and you need to put in some, or you can scratch the paper.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when an artist is doing grasses, they'll turn the brush around and take the handle and matter of fact, there are even some brushes that are made with a wedge-shaped handle just to do that, just to scratch things into textures into it. But with the acrylic, the thing about a watercolor is water soluble, and it's always water soluble. So even after you put it on the paper, as a kid, when you did watercolor on your Big Chief tablet, and you kept doing it, eventually it just turned into this big gray brown mass of mud looking stuff.
Paper pulp. Yeah.
Well, we used to call that, turning it into mud, and that's the bad thing for people like me that are such blurry warts about watercolor, is that even though it's down and it's dry, if you keep scrubbing it with a brush, or you keep working it with a brush, it'll re-wet, and then it'll dissolve, and then you'll end up smearing it or taking it off, but that's one of the techniques you can use, is to remove paint, like with a tissue, to make sky or to make a cloud.
The sponges. She had different sponges too. That's cool.
But acrylic, you can. At first, most people think of acrylic as thick, kind of like this red painting or something more.
Yeah, that red one. That's my friend.
Maybe oil, but
that's an oil. That's my friend Carol Ramirez, and I'll talk about that one briefly. I bought that from her. That is amazed me, because that is kind of what I see in my head when I'm playing music. I don't know how to explain it, but when I'm trying to learn a new song and work it out in my head, that's what I see. And there was absolutely no communication. She posted it, and I'm like, I want to buy that. You can kind of see it, but that's what it looks like. But yeah, that's an oil.
Well, most people Oil would probably be the most forgiving medium because it doesn't dry quickly. You put it on and you can work it and work it and work it as long as you want until it finally dries, and that can be a long time. And acrylic, on the other hand, it's what people hate about it or love about it. You can put it on thick, and it's kind of in the heavy, what they call heavy body acrylic, comes in a tube, and when you squirt it out, it's kind of like oil paint, and you can put it on real thick, and
it's got a little bit of grit to it.
Well, it has some form to it,
yeah,
and some dimension. It's called impasto if you put it on real thick, but it dries real quickly, and so it's impervious to water once it's set, and so sometimes oil painters dislike that because they like being able to go back and blend and whatnot. But you can also take acrylics, and they make liquid acrylics that come in a bottle, and the liquid acrylics have a real heavy pigment load, but they're more liquidy. But you can thin that. Either one you can thin, but I like to use the liquid ones because they have a real heavy pigment load, meaning that there's more pigment in the acrylic medium, and so you can thin it, and it's still pretty bright. I've even used airbrush colors that are just thin as water, and real fine pigment, but real bright. And then you can thin that out, and there's different mediums you can mix with the paint to give it different characteristics. And one of them is glazing medium. And when you use glazing medium, it extends the open time of your acrylic paint in the palette. Once you put it on the paper and it contacts the paper and starts to dry, it doesn't dry as fast as it would if it had no glazing medium, because if you're using heavy body acrylic with glazing medium, you want it to stay open so you can smear it like oil paint.
Okay,
so you can blend
sense.
it. But when you use it in real thin, like watercolor, you can use the glazing medium and a little water and liquid acrylic, and you thin it out, and now it's the same consistency as watercolor, and it works on the paper exactly like watercolor does. Or when I say exactly, maybe I should temper that a little bit.
It's close, yeah.
Well, here's the thing, is that different watercolor pigments actually function differently. Some of them granulate, some of them stain, some of them don't. I mean, and that's part of the issue. Now, the acrylics pretty much all behave the same way, but they basically behave like watercolor. So if you're using a wet and wet technique, where you wet the paper and then you use wet paint, it moves when you put it on. And the trick is to get it to move in the right place.
Yeah.
And then you can use what they call you can put thicker paint on wet paper, or you can do what they call dry brush, and on the end on dry paper, and you can brush it in, and it'll make a sharper, more detailed line. Well, in my paintings, I use all those. And so what happens, you can use those different techniques to really produce some very realistic looking things. Yeah. There's a painting that I have of I believe it's a woodpecker. I think it's a golden fronted wood. No, it's not. It's a cactus wren on a cedar log.
With the real scaly feathers, is that the one?
They're kind of white and dotting. Well, of course, all birds are about the same color. You can have about 6 colors and do about 80% of the birds. I mean,
I've seen that one.
But it's a cactus wren, which is a biggest wren, and it's on a cedar log, and it's got some shaggy pieces of dry bark hanging off of it. Well, if you look at that wood is just incredibly realistic, even for me. And it took me about a week to draw that piece of wood, that log.
That brought back another memory. My grandmother used to, she had an easel. I think we bought it for her birthday, a really nice easel. But when she was doing watercolor, she would lay flat on the table, and she would have them tilted, and she'd put it upside down, and some she would even hold up, flat, and to get a certain effect, and she would tilt it all around and do all this crazy stuff to get it to flow.
They have special watercolor easels, but typically, you would do heavy body acrylic and oil on an easel, and they use a long brush, and they, and you get back at it, and you're real painterly. Well, that's not my deal.
She did oil with the knives too.
Palette knives, and I like to work flat.
Yeah.
And that's because I need it. Sometimes I'll tilt it if I want to make it run a certain way, but mainly I'm after learning, and it takes a long time to learn how to control it. I mean, and that's how come, a lot of watercolors are real loose, and not my personality at all. I mean, and there are some gorgeous watercolors.
Really
that are
skies and sunsets
loose,
and waters.
but that's just not me. When I do it very controlled.
I love watching my wife do the pastels, the kind of charcoaly
pastels,
chalk stuff, because sometimes they just draw like a kid on the sidewalk, and she brushes it with her finger, brushes it with a brush, or it's fascinating. It's a very tactile kind. I mean, it's like almost like finger painting.
I thought I would love it, and I hated it.
There's no way I could do it. Yeah.
I mean, I thought it's just, I don't know.
It's too to me. There wouldn't be and I don't know anything about it. Again, I can't draw a stick figure, but watching her do it, I thought that's just not definite enough. I've done a lot of mechanical drawing that is good, but that would. Now, your stuff that you did in Inktober, was that acrylic?
No, that was all just liner marker or liner pens and just like marker and everything. So there was no.
I could have sworn some of them were more.
No, I had put some color in a few of them, but that was more just Copic markers or Prismacolor markers and things like that.
Those are markers.
They're all alcohol based, and so they're supposed to dry a little
bit.
Dry
right then and there.
They first started out making those for artists that did renderings, like commercial artists. I mean, do like an architect's rendering or something, and they added color, or graphic designers. Using those kind of things. And of course, artists immediately we latch onto anything that we think we can use. And they do some really cool stuff.
Yeah, they really do, yeah.
What I used to like to do, you mentioned, both of you mentioned pen and ink. And pen and ink, if you look at it, you think that's not forgiving. But in fact, it is. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so.
The reason it is because you just make tiny little marks. I mean, or you're stippling it, that's a dot. Well, one dot in the wrong place does not ruin a
right.
No.
And actually, it's almost not any wrong. So as you're working stippling and you're doing thousands and thousands of little dots on there, it's very gradual.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot more forgiving than what you would think. I mean, most people think India ink. Oh man, you make a mark and it's there forever, and that's true. But if you're doing cross-hatching, or you're doing stippling, or you're doing all these different marks, they're gradual, and so it's a lot more forgiving than what you might first think.
There was one piece that I did in Inktober that I was just really proud of. That I was like, I can't believe that this turned out as well as it did, and I'm really happy with everything that it was. And it was the One-Eyed Willie drawing from the Goonies.
Yeah,
and,
I remember that.
Yeah,
I'll put that up.
And that
here
one
too.
was just pen and ink. That's all I did. I had my little pen that I carry around with me, and it was just little dots or the lines and the cross hatching and everything. And just the way that I approached that one was a lot different than what I would normally approach anything that I'd really done. And like I said, it turned out in a way that I was a little bit surprised that I had done it. That's the mark right there. I've seen that, and photography is my thing, and of course music. And when I go back and hear a track that I've done for someone, or a photograph I've taken, especially after I've let it sit for a while, and I went through some of my old 35 millimeter stuff,
And I go, man, that doesn't look like I took it.
Yeah.
And you really, it's good for the ego, and you really want to put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I found a series, I'm going to diverge to photography just a bit, of 35s that I did way back in the day in some mines in Terlingua. Golden hour stuff of the old smelters and things like that on a caving trip we went on, and a few other things. It's amazing to take those negatives, scan them in, and run them through a good editor. And you and I kind of bantered the other day on Facebook about photo editing, and then to take a modern photo and soft proof it to make it's where you take a picture and then you make it look like it's been printed on old paper, some kind of sheet coat or Japanese paper or whatever you're using. It's just fantastic. As we shut down, guys, what I wanted to talk about, main thing is people who are thinking about this, who are on the edge, that want to get into art. So we do have Midland College has a ton of options, regular 4-credit and adult education, right?
Yeah, but you can even take 4-credit classes,
right,
as a casual student.
Yeah,
and or even as sometimes they'll sign you up and put you in a regular class, even though they call it a continuing education. Right. I've registered as a casual student, and I don't. The reason I think it helps the instructor in the college to have, because there's a difference in the way the students are classified.
Yeah, we went through that. We went through that with fencing. Exactly. We were a continuing ed, and we had other options of actually being a PE class, but I had a 2-year degree instead of a 4-year degree at the time, and I was the only coach. So that was an issue there. But I know they do drawing, they do painting, sculpture. Is there still an oil? There was.
Painting is probably going to be oils.
Okay.
Maybe
is
watercolor
it called painting,
too.
or
Well,
is it
there's
sort of
probably watercolor and painting.
Okay.
If you're taking I don't know Michael, the painting instructor, very well. I did take painting from Warren, and I did not have the same experience that he had. And it's funny because people, that's not. People sometimes just don't jihad. But the other side of the coin, I'll tell you what he did do. He probably gave me a whole lot more credit as a painter than I deserved when I went in his class.
Yeah.
But my oldest sister said, "Look, you're an idiot if you don't go out there and take watercolor from Warren, because he is an exceptional watercolorist, and Midland College is really lucky to have somebody of his caliber, and you really need to go do that before you retire." So I went over and took a couple of classes from him, or took several actually, and enjoyed him. But at the same time, the first time I went in the class, I kind of did the whatever painting one students did, but then after that it was kind of like, you can do whatever you want. And again, I took at night, and almost all the students that were in that class were experienced artists already, and had taken it for, Janet Haney, who taught art at Lee, Jane Becker also taught art at Lee at the time. And then Jane and I were classmates. We graduated from Lee, the same graduating class, and so and these people are teachers. And so and a lot of other really good artists.
The oil industry brings us a lot of people following spouses into, so one of the best recording engineers, in fact, he helped me set up my studio. He could work from anywhere in the world because he works mostly people sending him stems and mixing and mastering, and his wife was in, I think, petroleum or teaching, and came here, and there have been a lot of them. But so I know we got Midland College, and have either of you guys done the Palette Club?
I have not, but that is an option.
I'd really love to know if Mr. Cooper. I haven't seen him in years. He should still be alive, but I would love to get him in here. It'd be cool to talk about our teacher. But the Palette Club is doing a few things. I think they were doing watercolor and maybe some others. And you were going to say something. Did you have like kind of a how to get into art or what?
No, I was going to go back and to talk about Warren just for a minute. Like I said, it was just something, I don't know, from day one, we just never really were on the same page and everything. And that's just how people will get sometime. But I will say, the only piece of art that I have in my house that I've actually done and that's on the wall was a painting that I did from that class.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and it's that way in music. So the whole thing here and the point of this episode is if you're kind of on the fence about art, just get out and do it and find some places. There's you do classes. There's YouTube channels.
There are private lessons too. There are some people that do private. So I
don't
know.
Where are they at? I've heard about it, but do you know where they're advertising or anything?
I thought there was isn't there a?
I'm trying to think.
Isn't there a place over there where? On Wadley and Midland Drive, that shopping center that Monterey's in. Isn't there a deal called like Art Per View or something?
We'll look at that and post it in the comments.
But there's some, and of course there's the the ceramics things. But, and they're getting more into more. What is that thing called? The pottery?
Oh.
Well, the lady that owns it was in my class last semester. Yeah. And they bought some wheels. And so they're getting into
the wine and art.
And,
I was going to say the wine and art.
It's similar,
and there may be, I don't remember, maybe one of those wine and art things. But those
there is. My wife's been to it.
I don't know. Those are not really... Well,
but the thing is, they open doors, and that's kind of where I want to go as we close up. That if you're interested in this, look around and understand that not every instructor and every student, especially in art, will jive. I've taught people, and I've taken lessons on mostly on bass, but sometimes you just don't connect. You get two people that don't understand things, and I want to share a story before we leave. I started bowling last summer because that's just something I can't do my usual sports anymore, and I'm a big Lebowski fan, and every time I watched the movie I wanted to bowl, and I hadn't done it since I was a kid. And I was learning how to hook, and I watched video after video after video, and I was getting ready to take lessons, and then one day I just figured it out, and somebody said something that crossed my brain right, and I learned how to hook. And I was with I don't know if you were there, a couple of friends. No, it was just me and my son. It was just the two of us, and we were bowling, and there were these two kids next to us, young men. And this guy threw like a cannonball. Man, he was really just bang, bang, bang. And I threw a shot, and I was really sick from chemo. I was not feeling sharp, but I was throwing some nice hooks. And he goes, "Man, I have never understood how to do that." And I told him a kind of a visual description of what somebody had told me. It's like flipping a tennis ball in your hand and doing a yo-yo at the same time. And the kid goes, "Oh, okay." So he and I both on a very feel thing that you can't just teach like you can teach how to add. Mm-hmm. He kind of motioned. He goes, "Oh, hell yeah." He bowled a 200, his first 200 right after that. And I've never broken 200, but art being a feel thing, you got to find the person that just clicks with you.
Well, I'll say this: the drawing instructor that's there now is a young man named Dagan Sherman, and he's a printmaker, but he teaches printmaking and drawing 1 and 2, and printmaking. Do you know Dagan?
I don't.
He's a super nice young man and talented and good, and I mean Susan and I got to be such good friends after 10 years of taking her class and just being, in the summertime, our whole class, including her and her husband Dave, would all meet at Rose's, on like a Wednesday evening because we enjoyed being around each other so much from the class. So, and for us in the night class, see, we were the test board for her.
Yeah.
She could throw something out there, and we would all jump
see
all over
see if it sticks,
and see if it stuck. And then if she wanted it, and that's actually how the printmaking got started. She got a hold of a couple of old junker print presses, and we started doing prints at night, and we started doing the night class, and we did solar, what they call solar prints or photogravure.
That's amazing stuff.
And
to
it's really fun, and it's kind of akin to photography because you can do drawing and use a drawing, but you can use a photo, and you can actually you get it on a piece of clear acrylic.
Yeah.
Acetate, I mean.
Yep. Yeah, the acetate paper.
And then you basically contact print that acetate onto a plate, and then you wash it, and it washes away, but it washes away gradually so that there's grays, and then you ink that plate the same way you would do an etching. And then you print it. It's called the intaglio process, which means the ink is down in the crevices and the cracks, and then it lifts out with this paper.
I saw a guy do that. I got on one of the days when I was sick and just kind of staring, and we got to hurry up before we lose that camera. There are a bunch of kids doing that in tintype. There's some kids back to doing tintype photos. That's the old oval picture of grandma that was actually before the silver process would actually etch onto a tin type thing, and they're beautiful. And was it daguerreotype?
Photography was actually my first venture into art, and I built a colored darkroom.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about that. Yeah, we did black and white, but we better shut down, gentlemen, as we're about to lose that camera. We're way over time for that battery, but I have had an absolute blast. You guys make me want to draw stuff, even though I suck. So
draw even if you suck,
and even if you suck. Yeah,
there was. I hear people all the time when they'll come up to me and say, "Oh yeah, I wish I could do that," or "Here's a drawing, but I'm not an artist." And it's just no. If you drew that, if you're putting it out there, you're an artist.
You are.
Every kid's an artist.
Yeah.
Yep.
Who said that? Somebody famous, I think. Like Picasso or something.
Yeah, music, all that stuff. If you like it, like I say, I'm living proof that you can be a solid musician without just natural talent. You can work for it, and I'm extremely visual. So, but anyway, we got to shut down, gentlemen. We're at our mechanical limit. Enjoyed it, guys. Check us out. We got more videos. We'll put some more up at the end of this. Give us a like. Give us a subscribe. If you are near West Texas, got something interesting to say. I got nothing but time on my hands. So cheers, and we'll see you guys next time.